Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 18 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with Ahmed Siddiqui, who is a product leader at Branch and best-selling author of The Anatomy of the Swipe. He is also an instructor for a payments masterclass and is launching an online learning platform called the Academy of the Swipe, which is launching in January. Welcome, Ahmed. We're so happy to have you.
I'm so excited to be here, Chow. Thanks again for having me.
Yay, I'm so happy to be talking to you. Can you tell us a little bit about the Anatomy of the Swipe and the Academy of the Swipe?
Yeah, so the Anatomy of the Swipe is a book that I wrote maybe about 3 years ago. Actually now 4 years ago, when I joined Branch. And again, it was all around. There just wasn't a ton of knowledge for payments professionals available, and so as I was teaching a lot of the engineers at Branch about payments, I came to realize that there's a bunch of knowledge that I've just got in various Confluence pages that I would love to distill down into a book. And so I actually enrolled in a course on how to write a book to actually create this book, which was actually a really awesome experience because at least you're going through it with somebody. And didn't really think much of it originally. I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm going to, print off a few copies, give it to my team at Branch, which again was really small. It was like 35 people when I joined. And, surprisingly, it's being used by a lot of companies, including Visa, MasterCard, Stripe, Square, Marqeta uses it. And so it's been kind of an interesting ride over the last few years on that. So author by accident, I suppose. And then, the Academy of the Swipe basically follows off of that. So a lot of people have asked, considering that I've got the book, they asked, do you actually teach a class as well? And so over the last year, I've been teaching live cohort classes, but the Academy of the Swipe basically, takes all of that, puts it into video format, gives, people an opportunity to take quizzes, to submit homework, to doing projects, etc., all around payments, because again, it's a pretty exciting space that a lot of people are getting a lot of interest in, and the knowledge generally it's kind of kept inside of the brains of just a few people. So I was like, how do we kind of expand this knowledge a bit and get more people interested and excited about it? The hope is that there's more innovation that happens in the space.
That's so neat because it's a very interesting space, but also very complex, right? So it's like if we don't have someone to really walk us through it, you can learn it yourself, but it takes a while, So you having like figured it out and wrote it out for everyone and put it together makes it that much easier to get into.
Exactly. And, there's a lot of mistakes that I made. Like a lot of the learning that I've had in this particular space is just making a lot of mistakes, stumbling and fumbling. And I'm hoping that people can kind of fast track that by, avoiding some of the mistakes that I made.
That's awesome. And in the show notes, we're going to also link to your book. So folks that are interested can just go there and order the book. And then also, this is going to be released in mid-February. So by then, your platform will have launched as well, which is super exciting. So we'll have links to that as well.
Awesome.
So to get started, I'd like to just ask, how many kids do you have and what are their ages?
Yeah, so I've got 3 kids. Misha is the oldest. She's 10. Then I've got Mikal, my son, who's 8. And then the baby, who will always be baby, is 4. Her name is Marina. So girl, boy, girl. and it's been incredible.
That's so fun. You have like a range of different ages, right? Is 10, is that elementary, middle school?
She is just finishing up 5th grade, so she will be going into middle school next year.
Wow, then you'll have one in middle school, two in elementary by then, right? Because your youngest will be in kindergarten.
You got it. Yeah, yeah. So the youngest is at home right now, but she will be starting kindergarten next year.
That's exciting. And it's also bittersweet, right? When the youngest goes to kindergarten. Oh my gosh. I remember for me, I
Yeah,
was like, oh no. It was like I was happy for him, excited, but also like, oh, my baby. Where did the time go?
yeah, exactly. Well, it's the same thing, right? It's the
Yeah.
baby. Like it's always the baby, and it's like, oh, the baby is going to school.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, what brought you to tech and how many years have you been in tech?
So tech, I've always been in tech since I graduated. I graduated from the University of Minnesota in MIS. And so that's information systems. And so it's always been kind of around tech. I've always just been really into tech in general, always been really kind of enamored by some of the cool things that come out of Silicon Valley. And I remember, as I was graduating, PayPal was just coming out. And I remember just being completely fascinated by this idea of like, hey, I can send money to somebody with just an email. That's kind of crazy. And so that was kind of eBay was kind of up and coming around the time I was graduating. And, I was like, there's cool things happening in tech and I want to be a part of it. And so I, started my career actually in consulting with IBM. And so did a lot of that, did a lot of travel when I was there. And then eventually I decided that I've always wanted to like have my own company or work in startups. And obviously IBM is like the farthest extreme from that. And so I ended up quitting and moved to the Bay Area to be part of that ecosystem. And I tried my own hand at my own company. I actually was building kids' iPhone apps back when the iPad had just come out. So I was kind of fortunate to be in that space for a little bit and learn that you can't really make any money and it's just kind of tough to manage. And at the time I didn't even have kids. So I was doing all my testing on my cousins and whatnot. And then eventually kind of got into, I did a little bit in venture capital. And then fortuitously, I got into tech and payments at Marqeta, which is where you and I met. And that was again, completely by accident because my high school friend, Dave, was the head of product at Marqeta. And he just reached out cold on Facebook and we got together for coffee and he's like, hey, do you want to join me here? And I was like, yeah, okay, sounds kind of cool. Let's do it. So I've always been in tech.
So, was Marqeta the first time you'd been in fintech?
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't even know that word existed. So I was like, payments, fintech, what is this? I don't know. We always think about fintech. You always just think of Stripe and that's the only thing you hear about. But it's like, there's a whole new world in this space.
Yeah. So you kind of walked us through kind of your career a little bit there. So at what point did you have kids? How long have you been working when you had kids?
Yeah. So Misha was born in 2013, so I already had been working in sort of tech or just generally working for almost 12 years prior. So I didn't have kids, or I wasn't married for, for some time after school. And when we had Misha, I actually was working in venture capital at the time. And so it was a small venture capital fund, early stage called Signalfire that I was working for. What was beautiful about it is that it was literally a staircase that I'd have to walk up from my apartment and I'd be there. And it was a small office with like 4 people. So that was really, really small. And, at the time, so when Misha was born, I was kind of winding down my own startup and then kind of moving into this role. And, I actually got a chance to spend a lot of time with her because my wife was actually the one that was working more than I was. And so as I was winding down the iPhone app business, I had a lot more time. And so she was the one working. She's the pharmacist. And so I remember just like, rocking the baby carrier or what is that called? I don't even remember the name of that thing that you wear in front.
Yeah, like the baby Bjorn.
Baby Bjorn, you got it. Yeah. I was that guy walking around San Francisco with baby Bjorn on, just like walking the Embarcadero. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, actually. I've got a lot of fond memories with her being a baby and me carrying her in baby Bjorn.
Taking her all around downtown San Francisco, seeing all the sights and stuff.
Seeing all the sights, seeing, yes, good sights, bad sights as well. But yeah.
So, since you were winding down your iPhone app at that time, there wasn't really like a parental leave, right? It was basically your own thing and you're taking time.
It was my own thing. I didn't really have anything, no concept of that. I mean, it was cool because it was flexible. My wife had a lot of leave, obviously, from CVS, but again, when she started working, we were able to manage that. We also had a nanny as well, so it was cool because when the nanny was with Misha, then I could work on my projects. Oh, I did a lot of work with Startup Weekend too, so I was also running a lot of events. And so, obviously I was still working. And so the nanny would come in for a little bit, take care of Misha. And then there were transition points where, she would need to leave. I would, kind of come back in, and then my wife would work pretty late. And so then we would go and pick her up after that.
Nice. So, what was your wife's leave like?
She had very good leave. I want to almost say it was close to, like, I think they gave her something like 3 to 4 months leave.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think it was, and it gave her plenty of time to be with the baby and that sort of thing. So
And you said she's a pharmacist at CVS.
yes,
And did she have a mother's room over there?
she had the back room that she could use. Yes.
And so that was your first child. What about your second and third child? What was the parental leave like for those kids?
Yeah, so Mikal was born when I was at Marquetta. I feel like I was probably about a year in at Marquetta, and parental leave was very good there. So I think for me, I had 6 weeks, I want to say. It's something close to that. I felt like it was really, really good. And there, obviously, I mean, they had a dedicated mother's room there when we moved into the larger office. So I think when you and I met, we were in the really, really small office, and obviously there wasn't anything there, but
And I was in a conference room.
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember that.
yeah. So obviously, I mean, I don't go into the mother's room, but I know for a fact in the bigger office when we finally moved in there, I remember that was a thing, which is cool. But yeah, when Mikal was born, we had the 5 or 6 weeks of leave. I think it was a little bit challenging for me to take it all at once when I was there, simply because it was such a small team, and especially in product, like in product leadership in general, like I needed to be there for a lot of things, and so a lot of decisions kind of hinged on me being there, being part of the meetings, being fairly active. And so the way that we arranged it for the second one is that my mother-in-law actually was able to come in for a little bit, and then my mom was able to come and stay with us for a little bit. And so the way that we did it is I would take a few days here or there to help support, and largely it was more around me looking after Misha, our oldest, than the baby. So it was nice. It was really nice. And I mean, we've always been very close just because of, the previous experience. And so a lot of my time was kind of spent doing that. But because of the nature of the business, I spread out my leave quite a bit. And I almost feel like I probably spread it out over a year, kind of taking a few days here or there, or, appointments and those kind of things. That was key. And also, the other major difference when we had the second one was that my wife ended up leaving CVS. Not leaving CVS 100%, but she basically moved from being full-time to being part-time. And there with pharmacists, it's actually really flexible, where you basically, you kind of need to work, you only really need to work a few hours a month just to make sure that you're in the system. But that's entirely up to you. And obviously they want you to work a lot more. There were plenty of hours available, and were always asking her to work. But we came to realize that, childcare was just so expensive with two. I mean, it was expensive with one, but with two, it became even more so. And so we kind of weighed that out and said, hey, look, maybe we do kind of break this up. And so now everything kind of flipped, and I was the one making most of the income, and then my wife was mostly at home with the two kids.
Yeah, I remember the Marquetta parental leave. I think we talked about this a little bit when we caught up the other day of like, I had just had my third kid and I came back and then they had a all hands and they were like improving the parental leave and giving everyone more time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just missed it.
Just missed it. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. I think you had your third, and then I had my second kid. Like it was like kind of back to back. And I was able to take advantage of the better policy.
Yeah, I think you were the first one to have
Exactly.
taken
Yep.
advantage of that.
Yep.
So when you had your third kid, was it also at Marquetta?
No, so what had happened is that I was at Marquetta for about 4 years. We were pregnant with the third, and that's really where we needed to make a pretty significant life change. The reason being is that with two, I think it was pretty manageable for us being out there in the Bay Area. So we had a small house in Pleasant Hill on East Bay. Awesome house. I love that house. But we came to realize that with two, it was getting really hard. With three, we felt like we were a little bit over our heads, and we wanted to get some help from our parents. And again, the concept of like sending the kids to daycare or whatever did not necessarily sit well with my wife and I. Maybe we're like old fashioned or whatever, but it was just like, I don't know if I can trust somebody else with my kid. And we got lucky with Misha. We had a nanny who was incredible. But when she moved away, it just became really kind of challenging to say, all right, we have somebody that we can always trust. And so even though my parents are old, at least I can still say that they're kind of looking after. And so when we announced to them that we were expecting the third, we asked the question, it's like, would you move here? And obviously our house in Pleasant Hill wasn't very big, but I was like, look, we'll stretch the money, we'll get a bigger place, like make sure that you have your own space or whatever. And they were just like, we can't. I just have so much family in Minnesota that it would be not really good for my parents, even though they're retired, to be moving to the Bay Area, kind of like restarting their social life again, considering I didn't have any other family here. So we decided to move to Minnesota. And my wife's family is from Connecticut. My family is here in Minneapolis, and it's a very large extended family in Minneapolis. And so we ended up making the move, which also meant that I couldn't work for Marquetta anymore, which is very difficult for me to do simply because, I worked for a really good friend of mine. And, I feel like it was probably the hardest thing for me to do was like tell Dave, hey, Dave, we're pregnant with the third. I think we need to move back to Minnesota. Like it was a really, really hard conversation, very personal from that perspective, but we needed to do this. And then I got very lucky because I found another early stage startup called Branch here in Minnesota, because my biggest concern was, Minnesota is not known for like high tech startups, as you can imagine. But my concern was, if I'm going to move to Minnesota, will I still be able to get that same level of experience, at a fast growing tech startup? And I got lucky, found a company here. Again, I was employee 35 here as well. But it was funny because like all of that like work that I remember putting into Marquetta in the early days, I had to do that again. Right. And what that also involved is, again, very long hours, a lot of dedication. And then now I've got three kids. So that was kind of the main motivation for moving. But again, it's been great. Like we decided to buy a house like 5 minutes away from my parents. So if we need to drop the kids off, we can. Again, we don't try to do it that much because they're older, but it's nice to have that option.
So when you had your third kid, you were already starting at Branch.
Yes. Yes.
So what was their parental leave like?
Branch's parental leave was not as well defined as Marquetta, again, because it was a smaller company.
Early stages.
Yeah, early stages. But, the policy is pretty liberal here for both men and women, as it is right now. But back when I started, things were a little bit open-ended. And so I kind of took on the similar strategy here is, and by the way, at Branch we don't have an official like number of days of vacation. It's basically take vacation as you need it. It's not counted. So because of that reason, I kind of took a similar approach where, obviously when we were delivering, I ended up taking a few days there, and that was quite interesting because it was now about watching two kids. Luckily, I had my mom, so that was really huge for us. And just I can leave them there with my mom, and then do my thing, whatever. So I think it was different this time around because I wasn't all by myself in the Bay Area.
Yeah, that's nice to have that support and family near you. And then they're also getting to be there with the baby, right? To
That's
see the
right.
newborn.
That's right.
And I remember having the second kid, it was like, wait, what do we do about the first kid? And having the third kid, like, wait, what do we do about the first two? Because the first kid, you just rush to the hospital, right? And you're just there. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I have the other kids. You can't bring them with you, or can you?
Okay, actually, I mean, if it's interesting. So when we had McCall, my second one, he came early, and so with Misha, we already had my mother-in-law was already there, so it was easy for us just to just go. And obviously, we didn't have anybody else, but for McCall, he came 2 weeks early. And my mom wasn't booked to come early. So we scrambled to get her there. But I was like, what do you do in the meantime? So my wife, for the most part, was at the hospital by herself for a lot of it. And they allowed Misha, my oldest, to be in there for a little bit. But what was interesting is that my mom was not able to come in time because with Bay Area traffic how it is. So her flight came in, and then I had her take a limo over to the hospital in Walnut Creek. And that Bay Bridge traffic was just so bad that she literally walked in a few minutes after we delivered. And the only way that we were able to manage this was we had my daughter watching Finding Nemo on the laptop. So she was there during the delivery, but she was sitting there watching Nemo. And I was just like, we thought for a little bit, we thought about naming our second kid Nemo for that reason.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but thank God for Finding Nemo. And it was so funny because it goes, she was watching, baby is born, end credits roll. It was incredible. Like the way that sequence happened. So I owe a lot to Pixar for that story.
You couldn't have timed it any better, right?
Yeah, so end credits roll. It's a nice song, and then knock, knock, knock. Then my mom comes in, so it was like the perfect timing scenario.
Yeah, Finding Nemo got you through all of that.
Yes, exactly.
So you said right now your wife takes care of the kids, right?
Yes.
So is that what you do primarily for childcare? Is your wife takes care of them?
Yeah. So again, I've been really fortunate. I work from home, and it's been this way obviously since COVID. We opted to be a remote first company. So I've got my home office. So I'm here, but we opted to, especially when the third one was born, I ended up managing getting the kids to school kind of in those early days. And even today, like my son, his school is earlier. So he usually needs to be on the bus by about 7:20. And then my daughter, hers is later. So I think she gets on the bus around 9:20. So the way that we do it is that I will get my son ready for school early. That gives my wife some time to sleep in a little bit. And then I'll typically take care of the lunches and that kind of thing. So, I mean, basically all Misha needs to do is just get out of bed, brush her teeth, brush her hair, and get ready for the bus. So, I mean, she's able to kind of sleep in quite a bit more. So that's how we manage it. And then every now and then, if my wife needs to be out for something, I'll just pick up the kids. So she started working a little bit more nowadays, but for the most part, she works a few hours a month, basically as part-time pharmacist. And tomorrow, for example, she's working a few hours in the evening. So I will then go and pick them up as well. And the 4-year-old, the baby, she's pretty self-sufficient. I have to feed her and stuff, but she is really into Super Mario Wonder right now on the Switch, and she's actually pretty good. So she plays that for a little bit. She does her coloring, whatnot. So it's a lot easier to manage right now. But I mean, when they were younger, gosh, it was so hard. It was so hard.
Yeah, and it's much easier to get into a set routine now.
Yes, absolutely.
And you mentioned dropping off your kids at the bus stop in the morning. Do you also pick them up from the bus stop in the afternoon?
My wife does it most times, but as I said, like tomorrow, for example, when my wife is working, yeah, I'll go and pick them up from the bus stop.
I think it's so nice that you have the bus still over
I
there.
know.
Over
Yes.
over here, the district is like, no, we can't afford the bus anymore. So they either take the public bus, AC Transit, or we pick them up. And we're like, we don't want them on AC Transit, you
No,
know? So
no, I would not do that.
yeah, yeah. So we picked them up. So hearing you having the school bus, I'm like, that's so refreshing.
It is nice. Yes, it is nice. I think starting next year, it'll be challenging because we have Misha going to a different middle school, but there's going to be a little bit of drop off action happening there.
But then once you get into a set routine, right?
It's fine. I think where it gets really challenging is I have to travel quite a bit actually for work. So usually at least there's a two-day trip at least once a month either, and it's usually like Las Vegas or New York or the Bay Area. And so those days get a little bit challenging, I think, for my wife, especially because you kind of have to like manage that whole morning. At least with us kind of splitting it in the morning, it becomes really easy, and it's a routine now. So it's not as bad. But when you have to do both in the morning, you know how they are. They're both of them do not want to get up for school, but yet on the weekends they're like up at 6 a.m. So
Right. On the weekends, I don't know where they get that energy from. They're just
exactly.
up really early because no school, right? That's when they they have their energy.
And now it's just like you literally have to drag them out.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that's not just my kids. Because on the weekends they're ready to go.
They're ready to go. I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah. And that's when we want to sleep in, right? But
Exactly.
no. They're like, "Nope, we're awake."
We're awake. I want food. That's usually what it
Yeah.
is.
So, how has your work life changed since becoming a parent?
Work life for me, I definitely think I've been a lot more intentional about these things. So, like, I mean, granted, with McCall in the mornings, like, nobody's like actively messaging me or wanting to talk to me that early in the morning, anyways. But, I make sure that I have that time. I have time to like get ready for myself, etc. So work wise, like, I mean, I think I've been able to manage that pretty well. And I've been really fortunate because, again, it's a remote work type of thing. I think everybody kind of understands. There was a time when the baby would just come into the room and she'd just want to hang out. So for the longest time, we were like, okay, we should probably shut the door. Or when you shut the door, she would just start banging on the door, which is even more disruptive. So then I was just like, let's just keep this door open and let her come in. And everybody knows her now. And they're just like, okay, whatever. She doesn't do anything. She's actually really pretty good and quiet. And I've been really fortunate, actually. Like, all three of my kids have been sort of very respectful of like the remote work culture. And so they don't typically interrupt, but if they do, they're like really good about it. And they know that there are certain times where I just need it to be quiet. So I've been really, really fortunate. I feel like I've got some really good kids when it comes to that, because I've seen other parents struggle with it. I've been really fortunate there. But I would say, though, the book, the training stuff has been probably the biggest challenge. So when I wrote the book about a year later, my sales team wanted to pick it up, and they basically said, you know what, sales guys, we don't have time to read, but we're on the road a lot. Can you do an audiobook? And that was really challenging, Chow, because you have to do it when it's like super quiet, because the microphone picks up everything. So I remember doing that recording like 4:35 in the morning, before like all the kids were getting up, and before getting everybody ready and that kind of thing. And so that was challenging. And then for the academy, it's video lessons. And so those are really challenging to do, because again, now you're having to sort of perform on video and have good audio quality. You can't have a ruckus in the background. And so those recordings were typically done like crazy early in the morning, or they were done on a weekend when the kids were out. So those sort of things are challenging. I mean, as you're kind of getting big into the content creation, I'm sure you're dealing with some of this stuff too, but it's like content creation with kids it's not easy. Like, I think if I was single and didn't have the kids, I probably could produce a lot more than what I do now.
Right. You got to take advantage of those moments when they're asleep, but it's like you also need sleep too.
I need
So,
sleep too, yeah. And again, especially in the morning, like I need a lot of coffee to like really be up, but it's like coffee, shower, get ready, be on your A game because again, if you're on video, you got to perform.
right. And I was going to say, and being on video is adds a whole nother level to it, right? Like you have to brush your hair, you have to get
Exactly.
ready.
Yeah.
Wow. So, what has been your biggest struggle or challenge being a parent in tech?
I mean, I think just kind of finding the right balance of time. The other call out that I want to make is it's balance of time and it's also just being present. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, but you really need to like make that into a thing because, all of us we're on Slack and it's like it doesn't matter the time of day. We're working remote, we've got people that are on different coasts. Luckily, we don't have anybody overseas, which definitely helps a lot. But again, some people are in New York, some people are in California, so they've got different times and whatnot that you're working with. And that Slack, your phone is sitting with you, and you get the Slack notification on it, and it's tough not to respond. But I think especially as, I work pretty late. Like I would say I probably work all the way through about 6 o'clock. And then we usually will have dinner. And then right after that, it's all about, getting ready for bed or like finishing up homework and that kind of thing. And usually what I try to do is for that time period, I just put my phone away and, get the kids to bed. Usually we start the whole getting to bed process around 8. And I don't usually get done until about like 9:30. And so then at that point, that's where I, start really looking. I mean, it's tough not to be kind of glancing and peeking at the phone, but I think it's really important to be present. And I think kids pick up on this stuff really easily. I mean, obviously they're just entrenched in technology right now. They're on iPad and whatnot, but especially with the baby, it's like she knows when you're not paying attention. You might be like looking at your phone and then also kind of nodding and whatever, and she'll say it. She'll be like, "Get off your phone. I want to talk to you. I want to have a real conversation." Right. And so that was kind of, I mean, that's the main thing. You have to be really intentional, and that's really tough. That's really tough. I don't know if I mean, I'm sure it impacts people outside of tech too, but like generally speaking, considering that we're always on. And again, startups have their own demands too. I mean, this is not a 9 to 5 job. It's been challenging, but also good in a way too.
So, mainly just kind of putting your phone away when you are spending that time with the kids and being really intentional about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and also you mentioned earlier sort of struggles with your kids at younger ages and stuff. So, what about right now with your kids being 10, 8, and 4? What do you struggle the most with at their current ages?
So at the current age, the 4-year-old needs a little bit more, but the two older ones definitely are a lot more independent now. And so there's been a lot of like just general breakthroughs of just things that I don't have to do anymore. Like they've got their own chores and they're kind of helping out and whatnot. Actually, the main challenge these days is to make sure that they follow up on their chores. Even though we've got our own lists and whatnot, they don't do everything until you kind of have to like be on them. I think the challenge that I'm working through right now is more about how do we teach responsibility to them without it seeming like so much work or it's just not being cool or whatever. And especially with my oldest, like I still feel like she has a responsibility of being the example for the two younger ones. And I mean, I'm the oldest in the family, in my family, as well. And so like I remember that being drilled into my head. It was like, okay, you are the oldest, you have to be, responsible, etc. So like, trying to instill that with my oldest, it's challenging. It's really hard to do that. And so I think there's that sort of stage in life that they're in that's gonna be challenging. I think, once they start going into middle school and whatever, the challenges are going to be a lot more different. I think the role shifts a little bit more. At least now it's kind of like I get to do some of the fun stuff with them there, then it kind of shifts to more around advisory and that sort of thing. So my wife complains. She's like, well, how come you're the one that gets to do all the fun stuff and I have to be the disciplinarian? But I mean, I think we both do the disciplinary stuff. I mean, obviously she's with them a lot more, so it might seem that way. But I would say that I think these things are getting a lot more challenging now.
And it's interesting you mentioned that about the oldest one, because definitely you want them to feel responsible, want them to be that role model. But at the same time, there's that balance where we don't want them to feel resentful either, to
Yes,
feel like, gosh, why am I always the one having to do that? And I think there was a moment where it dawned on me of like, wait, I also don't want them to feel resentful and feel like, gosh, it sucks being the oldest one. So being careful about that.
exactly. Yeah, okay, I'm glad that we both feel the same way.
And then yeah, middle school is a whole nother thing. I definitely when my oldest went into middle school, I wasn't ready. The things that he came back with, I was like, oh my goodness, that's what you learn in middle school. I was definitely not ready. And then it took me a while to adjust to that. And now our second one is also middle school. And so I'm like, okay, I've been through this. I
Yeah.
know what to expect now. And he also knows what to expect because seeing his older brother in middle school kind of helped him as well to adjust a little bit. And so, I think something that we're all working through is kind of work life balance. So, what are some things that work for you to kind of achieve that?
Yeah, work-life balance again. Like I said, the being intentional piece has been really key. It's hard to escape work. And I mean, I am generally speaking, and especially where I am, sort of in the organization, like I am constantly thinking about work. And so, when people say, "What are your hobbies?" It's basically like, well, I I don't know if this is qualifies, but work and my kids and my family, like that's really how it boils down to. So I don't really have a lot of time for anything else, unfortunately. I'm not very athletic in general, so it's not like I play sports, but it's a lot, like I definitely, I know for a fact that when I go and travel for work in the evenings, I'm like, God, why do I have so much time? And it's just because like, when I'm here, it's all just occupied. And then you're like, yeah, I don't really have time to watch TV. I don't like want to watch Netflix or whatever. I just want to spend 100% of my time with my wife and kids.
So, what helps you unwind, whether it's like with the kids, with the family, by yourself?
The unwinding, I don't think the unwinding necessarily, I mean, there are things that we do together as a family that help unwind, and it just kind of gives a good perspective that there are more things to life than just work, right? But also at the same time, I've recently just started going on a walk just by myself, and that's helped a lot. And again, I mean, I didn't have this particular issue in California because it's sunny there and you can be outdoors. But in Minnesota, you're basically locked up indoors for a long period of time and it doesn't get sunny, especially during like January, February, March. Like it's dark all the time, the snow, you don't want to go outside. And it's almost like kind of have to force yourself to go outside. So you bundle up like crazy and you just go out for a walk. And I think that that's been really helpful for me to kind of like clear my head a little bit. But it's just, there's a lot going on, a lot of stuff, family stuff going on, a lot of stuff going on at work. And like, it's hard to just kind of take that step back.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's also just another task to go outside, right? Like you have to bundle up and
Yeah.
really get ready to do that.
Yeah.
So, what would be something that you would tell someone that's going to be a parent, or like something you wish you knew before embarking on this parenting journey?
Yeah, no, that's great. So the first one is always the hardest, and you'll be the most paranoid on the first one. So every little thing that they like sneeze, and you're like, oh my god, we got to go to the hospital. And then the second one, like those things, because you've got the experience, uh, gets a lot easier. But juggling those two, it's not double the amount of work; it's actually exponential the amount of work. And so I don't think a lot of people are prepared for that, but also at the same time, there's nothing you can do to prepare. You just kind of have to like let it go in the moment. And like, I think what I didn't really realize as I was going through it is that actually most parents go through it. It's not odd to do that. And the other thing I will say is that the definitely having multiple kids is pretty consuming. And one of the things that I wish that I would be able to do a lot more of is spend more time with my wife one-on-one. And that becomes really hard to do, especially if, one person is the primary caretaker as well, where it's like you have that bond. And I mean, again, my background is from Southeast Asia, so it's like I think we just generally have some cultural norms of just being like really attached to our kids, and so much so that sometimes we're just like, all right, we forget about ourselves, we forget about our spouse. Like it's that kind of thing. And that's probably the one thing that I wish that I do a lot more of. And it's hard to do, but you kind of have to make that effort.
Yeah, being intentional about that as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we were married for 6 months and then we were pregnant with the first kid. And in retrospect, I'm like, oh, maybe we should have spent more time together before because we didn't know that then we would have 1, 2, and 3 kids. And then before you know it, the years fly by.
The years slide by. It's crazy. Yeah. So we had a year before we got pregnant with Misha, and so like that still didn't feel like enough.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And, as you mentioned, we'd known each other since Marquetta, but like, I feel like I know a whole nother side of you now. So it's really, really neat to hear your story.
Yeah, no, it's so fun catching up with you, and I'm so excited for your podcast and what you're doing, and just exposing these stories out there. I think is incredible. So just keep doing what you're doing, Chow. This is incredible. So, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you so much. And please send me the links when you have it, and I'll add it to the notes when this gets released.
Awesome.
And good luck with your learning platform. And I hope you sell a lot more books too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Take care.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, @parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.